What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast.
So it's been, as I said earlier on, quite a week, especially when you consider it's only Tuesday. Yesterday, the Prime Minister's statement, of course, the resignation, the proroguing of Parliament until March 24th, and so many questions that remain unanswered. Marc Miller is a federal immigration minister, and I think fair to say one of Justin Trudeau's oldest friends. They've known each other for a long, long time. Minister, I thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Let me begin.
Thanks for having me on, Ed.
Yeah, let me begin by asking, first of all, you obviously, and I think most people within the party knew this was coming. Anything you heard yesterday surprise you?
No, it was classy. I think for a lot of people, it was obviously for everyone a historic moment in Canadian history, but it was a painful one for a lot of us that got into politics because of Justin Trudeau, what he represented, what he continues to represent. What I heard yesterday was consistent with what I know of him. As you mentioned, our friendship, it's been since 1984, since we've known each other, studied together, been friends for that period of time through thick and thin, but been professional colleagues for 10 years. And, I've spent a ton of time over the last few months with him, having conversations about options, about his future. And he is to a fault focused on the impact of any decision he has to make on Canadians and the country that he loves. And you heard that yesterday. It was his decision was the right one for the nation. But it isn't one that leaves him without remorse or regret, and rightly so, because he's a human. And these decisions, if they don't hurt, you probably shouldn't have been there in the first place, because he still has some fight in him, Aaron. He mentioned it yesterday. He's a fighter. People may accuse him of going a couple rounds too long, but he's a passionate guy, and that's what got him to be Prime Minister, is exactly what he has in his guts. And he still thinks he's got it in him to beat Pierre Poilievre and present to Canadians a view of the country that he loves, but he realized that he'd become, I think, a lightning rod for a number of things, and he is smart enough to know that he can't fight a battle on 2 or 3 fronts and not have that affect Canada and Canadians' decision about him and about our party. So he made the right decision yesterday, even though it does come with some regret.
There was some talk. I actually spoke to Stephen Marr earlier in the afternoon. When we talk about why he waited as long as he did, we know he was away at Christmas, spending time with his family. Your name actually came up directly. So did Dominic LeBlanc, suggesting that maybe you, and I'm sure you were talking to him at the time, certainly from the position of a friend, someone he's known for so long. Did you try to convince him to delay this, to change his mind? What was that conversation like?
Aaron, to be fair, and the discussions that I have professionally with the Prime Minister are ones that I will take to my grave. I think a lot of that has been misconstrued. There was certainly, the Prime Minister cares deeply about his cabinet and about the people around him that are fighting every day for Canadians, and was quite open about how he felt in the wake of the resignation of his Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. And people took that to mean a lot of things. I don't think he intended at that point to resign, so there's not the ability to have a conversation about resignation or not. The immediate concern from the resignation of Chrystia Freeland was to make sure that the country was being best served with the decisions that we needed to make in the immediate day, 24 to 48 hours. That included the nomination of Dominic LeBlanc to Finance Minister, and the continued reflection that he was having over a period of months about his decision whether to stay or whether to go. I think he probably thinks that he should be the person to beat Pierre Poilievre, but he knew out of the love for his country and a lot of love for Canada that it could not be him. That, to my earlier point, leads to feelings of some remorse and some regret, but he was serene in his decision, and again, it was the right decision to take. As a friend, but most importantly as a professional colleague, I walked through a number of options with him, and those are things that I would never discuss.
Okay, so there was some wavering on his point, in his position. That's sort of what I'm getting from your comments. This wasn't about, I've made up my mind and this is what I'm going to do, and there was still some wavering?
Look, I think it's safe to say that his final decision really congealed certainly over the course of the last few days, but over the course of the last couple of weeks. Okay. We've all been under fire for months. spend time, our waking hours, serving Canadians as elected officials, and so we should. But he obviously needed to take the time to be with his family and to celebrate Christmas, which is two things that he takes quite seriously. So that reflection, I think, solidified over the course of the last 2 weeks, over a period where most people are taking some holidays.
All right, let me ask one other thing. Relative to what he said yesterday, it's been suggested it was somewhat disingenuous when he was asked, and I realize you're put on the spot, right? At that particular moment, someone said, "What are your biggest regrets?" And the one thing he brought up, the first thing and only thing, as it turns out, he did say he's sure there'll be others. He brought up this idea of Canada's voting system. And when we talk to people after the fact, they say, well, isn't that rich when he had the opportunity to change this when he did have a majority government, yet chose not to? Yet that's the first thing he brought up, asking if there were any regrets. Did that strike you as odd?
No, but I lived through that, Aaron, and the details of the back and forth within Parliament. We had a majority at that point in time, and yes, whoever told you that is accurate in saying we could have rammed it through. I had personal beliefs that wanted us to keep the first past the post system. It's something that I like, but I subscribed to the Prime Minister's view and supported a look into electoral reform, which included different forms of proportional representation that would allow Canadians to make sure that their preference was accurately reflected in a Westminster system that can give people with 33% of the vote a majority in Parliament. And for some people that seems unfair. I think, given our history, it is fair. But the Prime Minister, when we were reflecting on the lack of consensus that the work that we did earlier on in our government yielded, which was some views on first past the post, some views on proportional representation, preferential ballots, it was clear there was no consensus. And yes, we could have rammed it down people's throats. But again, the Prime Minister, to a fault, worries about the impact that has on the nation and on Canadians, and rightly felt that he couldn't move forward on that type of reform and the divisive nature that would have caused within Parliament, within Canada, if it's simply one party ramming through its preference. And I respect him for that. But people are accurate in saying that technically he could have rammed it down people's throats. I give him a lot of credit for choosing not to do it, and he had that option. All
right. Let me ask this, and you brought up Chrystia Freeland. I think we can all agree that the Chrystia Freeland incident was the straw that broke the camel's back. Is that fair to say?
I think there were a lot of elements. The departure of a finance minister and the deputy prime minister weighs heavily. It's certainly not the only factor, but I'm not going to tell people on air that it didn't weigh into the influence and the decision making process. But there was a number of factors over the course of the last 6 months that weighed into it, including what was going on in his caucus, which was creating those multi-front battle, particularly with the threats of job-crushing tariffs that the Trump administration is threatening on inauguration against Canada. And I think his focus, again, to a fault, was to make sure that he took himself out of the equation of the party dynamics and focused, frankly, on what's happening to the south of us. And indeed, proof of that is that he showed up to a meeting he didn't have to, our subcommittee on Canada-U.S. relations, and was part of that discussion where we were discussing the appropriate response to whether and when the Trump administration imposes tariffs.
How much did poll, and I realize perhaps that's not a question I can get a fair answer to. You talk about Chrystia Freeland being one of the things perhaps that was a motivating factor for him ultimately to leave, people within the caucus stepping away, deciding not to run again. Those things start adding up. I understand that. But when polling numbers go from bad to worse to worse to worse, at some point, don't you sit back and go, okay, with a 25% or 25% difference, I guess, in between the Conservatives and the Liberals, there was no hope of winning an election. Right. I mean, at some point, don't you look at those numbers and decide the best thing for the party is for me to step down?
A lot of politicians that you have on air, including commentators, will say publicly that we don't look at polls. That's never really that true. There are, that said, a number of politicians that pay less attention than others. I've seen provincial governments basically govern their media cycle by poll. It leads to disastrous outcomes. What I do give credit to the Prime Minister on is he does pay attention to public sentiment. He has to, or else it costs you pretty quickly your job. But you can't be governed by poll alone. In May of 2015, we were totally in the dumps, and within 3 months, we had a majority. So things do change. Elections do count. And I give credit to the Prime Minister's guts and fighting sentiment to think that he could pull this off. He just was smart enough to realize he couldn't do that with 3 or 4 battles. And frankly, the lack of reliable horses to take us all in a unified way into battle, and to the extent that he was the polarizing force there, I think it was smart from him to take himself out of that equation.
I don't want to dwell on this. I do want to get your take on it, though. I took phone calls earlier in the afternoon because there's been a great deal of discussion over what he said, his comments on Chrystia Freeland yesterday during his statement, when he talked about her having been his right hand, having worked together for 10 years. And, of course, the opposition takes that, and all our pundits said the same thing, that, in effect, what he did was throw Chrystia Freeland under the bus. In other words, made it easy for the opposition to say, look, she's no different than he is when it comes to an election. If she is leader of this party, she is basically Justin Trudeau's right hand. He admitted as much in his statement. Do you feel he threw her under the bus?
I don't think that was at all the intention. I think 2 things can be true at once. She does have different views than the Prime Minister. I've sat with her in cabinet where she has expressed those. That is part of her job as the Finance Minister, to have a robust back and forth between her and the Prime Minister's office, and frankly with me in the role when I come and ask her for money. That's a healthy feature of democracy. It's also true that she has been instrumental in pretty much everything we've done, including the important measures that we took through COVID, and she should be quite proud of that. And I hope that as part of her leadership run that she runs on that record, because it is one that's significant, and it's not necessarily dissociable from the Prime Minister. People will use that in a negative way. I would see it positively, but she's a different person, and she has her own views. She's entitled to them, and she will most certainly distinguish herself vis-a-vis the other candidates. And I think that's what the party needs. So Canada needs. She's a different person than Justin Trudeau, but she has been integral to his success and integral in shaping the economic vision of the country that she has endorsed, and that you can't escape from that record either. So these are sort of 2 things that can be true at once. I don't think there was anything nefarious in what the Prime Minister said. I think it was an act of grace and graciousness.
Let me ask you one last thing before we run out of time. First of all, do you think, knowing him as well as you do, Parliament's going to be prorogued now for a couple of months till the end of March. Do you think he is done politically as a force?
I don't. I think there's some value to seeing Justin Trudeau unshackled, and he is a formidable opponent. He's still the Prime Minister. We're not in any form of caretaker scenario. He's still fully the Prime Minister of Canada. He now has the ability to focus on governing, and that's what he will do. It's why he not only convened a cabinet meeting, but he attended our most important subcommittee right now, which is our relationship with the U.S. So I don't see him at all as a spent force. He isn't re-upping in the next election, so we'll have to, as a matter of party dynamics, choose the next leader and unify behind a new leader. But we haven't heard the last of Justin Trudeau. He just won't be presenting himself as the leader of the party for the next election, and that has a value to it. But it also has, the downside you mentioned. I just think if people think that, they're underestimating in Justin Trudeau.
Last question. A lot has been already, only a day later, talked about with respect to who may succeed him. We've had as we say, the usual suspects have been named. Mark Carney, Anita Anand, Chrystia Freeland, and on and on and on. I've not heard Marc Miller's name mentioned. Are you one of those people who is poking around to see if perhaps there's some support for you as the next leader of the Liberal Party?
There's lots of support for me. Lots of people have reached out to me, Aaron. There's no chance in hell I'm running in this race for a variety of reasons. I have too much respect for the next 3 months in the position that I'm in as the immigration minister to spend my time on that. I think the government deserves and needs people in cabinet that can afford some stability during that period. So I've been and the reason people aren't mentioning it publicly is I've said equally publicly as well to the media that there's not a chance I'm running. So that pretty much answers that. But I'll be exercising my vote like every other Liberal Party member, and I'll be commenting publicly on the person that I feel is the best to lead the country into the next election. And that'll depend on a number of factors. I think the policies and the ability to speak reasonably to Canadians matters to me. And more importantly, the ability to beat Pierre Poilievre, which is the type of person Canadian politics hasn't seen. And I think he has the potential to be quite destructive to this country, and that worries me tremendously. It should worry all Canadians.
We'll leave it at that. Marc Miller, Canada's Federal Immigration Minister. Marc, thanks so much for the time. Always appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron.
Informative, interactive, and always interesting.
This is Montreal Now.
We're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes, similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system.
That is Meta owner, Facebook, Instagram owner, Mark Zuckerberg, from just a couple of days ago with a rather, I think, fair to say, startling decision to, as he said, stop with the fact-checking on both those sites and, in fact, go to what he called, communities, right, which is what they do on X right now. So I played that because this is when we talk about tech for the week, and clearly this is the biggest story in tech. Carmi Levy, CTV tech analyst, is on the line. So, Carmi, let's start with that. I hate to say it certainly smells of politics when you consider that, of course, in the past, Donald Trump, I think at one point said, Facebook should be outlawed. They should go hang and arrest or whatever, Mark Zuckerberg. So this is 180 degrees from where that was. Is this political, do you think, in nature?
Oh, 100%. It isn't just startling. It doesn't just smell, Aaron. It reeks. And if you kind of listen into the wording, the phrasing that Mr. Zuckerberg used in the rest of his video, it almost sounds like a list of Republican talking points. And in many ways, it comes directly from the White House. Here we are, a little over a week and a half away from Donald Trump taking office on the 20th. Mark Zuckerberg has already made pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago. He's already donated $1 million to the inauguration fund, as has Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, as has Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Alphabet, Google's parent company. And so one by one, all of the tech billionaires are essentially ensuring that they're aligned with Mr. Trump, even if they have quite the history with the man in the past. And Mr. Trump has railed against them over the years for too much content moderation, not being fair to Republicans, whatever complaints. Most of them, of course, not grounded in truth, but that doesn't matter in his world. And so what they're doing really is preparing for the next 4 years, ensuring that they are seen as friends of the new administration so that Donald Trump doesn't wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly decide to put them on blast with a social media post like he's done in the past. It's simply, this is what CEOs do. They behave in ways that are good for their company, even if they make the rest of us want to vomit.
Okay, so I get what you're saying. I would ask with respect to how this will work going forward for people who don't understand, right, the idea of fact-checking versus what he calls, community. What's the difference here, Carmi? How will it change?
So it's going to look a lot like what X has already done. So basically, if you come across something on either Facebook, Instagram, or Threads, the newer platform, that you think qualifies as misinformation, you will then be able to tag it, much like you do today. And then that initiates an investigation process. Today, those fact checkers, those content moderators, digital safety personnel, they will take those complaints and do some research into them, dig a little bit into the background, and decide whether it should be removed, whether it should be retained with a note attached to it, or whether they do nothing at all. Maybe the complaint is unfounded. What essentially happens now is those fact checkers go away, and instead, the responsibility for adjudicating these complaints falls now on the community. You and I, if we want, we can devote our time to do this. And much like on X, members of the public can weigh in and attach what's called a community note to contentious content to provide additional facts, additional content, maybe correct any misinformation that might be there. It sounds great in theory. On paper, this is a perfect solution. It's kind of how Wikipedia operates. It's an entirely voluntary public thing known as crowdsourcing. The problem here is, as we've seen on X, in many cases, it isn't about surfacing the truth. You end up with opposing factions battling each other out to see who can scream the loudest. And so it really isn't about getting rid of misinformation. It's all about maybe reducing costs for Meta and ensuring that Donald Trump is happy with the result. Nothing more, nothing less.
With respect to hateful comments, racist comments, what happens with that kind of stuff?
Mark Zuckerberg has admitted as part of his comments that it will probably lead to a rise in harmful content, at least in the near term. I think he's understating the problem. It's going to turn these platforms into essentially a hellscape, which is what we've seen happen on X, which is if you are concerned about the level of toxicity on social media, misinformation, predatory behavior, anything that would make you feel less safe, we are about to go from bad to worse because there will be no adults in the room. It will be an absolute free-for-all, and it's only a matter of time before those kind of dark forces take advantage of the fact that there are fewer controls, looser controls, which is exactly what Donald Trump wants. He doesn't want moderation online. He has falsely accused the platforms of censoring him, and he essentially wants to be able to say what he wants. He wants his followers to be able to say what they want, even if it's, if it's misinformation, even if it's damaging, even if it's harmful to others across society. It doesn't really matter under the new regime.
Let's move from Meta and for Facebook and Instagram, if you can, off to TikTok. So we talked about TikTok in the past, attempts to basically shut it down. Now, what is happening in the U.S.? Because I'm not sure that we sort of follow the same example here, but if TikTok was going to be outlawed, is the Trump administration favor that or not?
Trump administration does not want TikTok to be outlawed. Donald Trump famously tried to outlaw them during his first administration, but he has since had a change of heart. And he's decided he wants to save them. Of course, right now, the company is under a Biden administration law, an order that requires them to sell themselves to an American company by January 19th, 10 days from now, or risk being ordered to shut down in the U.S. Donald Trump has said he's asked for a delay to that so that he can work out what he calls a political solution when he gets into office. He has asked the Supreme Court for that. He filed an amicus brief on that. TikTok's lawyers are asking for that as well. That will be heard in the U.S. Supreme Court tomorrow. And so the Supreme Court might stop the proceedings entirely, might delay them. And if they don't, then January 19th is kind of the day that there's the possibility of a shutdown in the U.S. Here in Canada, this doesn't apply here, but of course there are 14 million Canadians who use the app regularly. We're going to notice if suddenly 170 million American users drop offline. There are a lot of influencers that we follow, a lot of customers that Canadian businesses market to on TikTok. It's going to have a huge effect here north of the border as well.
Yeah, I don't want to involve a conspiracy theory here, but Trump, who you said has changed his mind on this. Remember, they were looking to try to get an American buyer under, you said, the Biden administration. There's nothing to suggest that, I don't know, someone who's friendly to Donald Trump, who happens to have a few, spare $1 billion could conceivably buy this as well, right?
I would expect that those negotiations are probably already happening now, and I would expect if an announcement is going to happen, it's going to come before the 19th. I think someone might be able to score a screening deal on TikTok if they want. The problem then becomes if it's owned by an American company, ByteDance, which is the Chinese company that currently owns them, they have said they will not allow the algorithm to go with the sale. In other words, it'll look like TikTok. It'll have the logo on it. It'll still be the same app, but in the background, it'll work very differently. And it might not be the viral, crazy video dancing sensation that it's been all along. So it might be a case of Donald Trump will get what he wants, but you got to be careful what you wish for because it might kill the goose that laid the golden egg.
Okay. Last thing I want to bring up just really quickly here, and just because this story I thought had gone away, that Cybertruck, the person who blew himself up in front of the Trump's hotel in Las Vegas, now we know AI was involved. What's that story?
So the perpetrator who ended his life just before the truck blew up, they analyzed his online accounts and they found that he was using ChatGPT before the attack, looking for information on explosive targets, the speed at which certain rounds of ammunition would travel, and whether fireworks were legal in Arizona. Of course, this was all connected to what actually played out on that street in front of the Trump hotel. So this is the first time where a chatbot has been used in the commission of a crime or the planning of a crime. And it illustrates that if the public at large is using AI tools increasingly, chances are criminals are going to be using them as well. And we kind of have to ask ourselves the question, are we building the right kinds of guardrails in place to ensure that tools like this can't be used for crimes in future? It's going to happen. We have to start studying how we prevent that from happening again.
Carmi Levy, CTV tech analyst. Carmi, thanks so much and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Informative,
Interactive,
and always interesting.
This is Montreal Now.
So here we are. You got your New Year's resolutions. You decided after partying up a little too much over the holidays, drinking, eating, whatever else, you're going to spend the next 30 days. Forget about the no alcohol stuff, but yeah, you're going to start detoxifying your body. That's the big word. That's been the buzzword now for a few years, right? The question is, do any of those products that claim or promise to detoxify your body actually do anything other than perhaps take your money? So I wanted to get our friend Dr. Chris Labos to weigh in on this because, as I said, this is the kind of a story that makes its way into the beginning of every new year. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and do a cleanse for 30 days. It's good. It'll get rid of the toxins in my body. And then I'm reading the story and seeing that there is apparently, I shouldn't say apparently, according to the studies that I've seen, no real proof to that fact. In fact, you may actually do some harm. So let's find out more. Dr. Chris Labos is a cardiologist with a degree in epidemiology and a regular contributor here on CJD 800. Chris, first of all, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So, thank you. You read this. I sent you the article just to have a look at, and I'm sure you've heard this as well. We all, right, beginning of a year, want to do better. We figure a 30-day cleanse of some kind, detoxifying, makes sense. Does it?
No, not at all. Not at all. Here's the problem. The word detoxify has essentially become almost a red flag for pseudoscience because it doesn't actually have any precise medical definition. You do not have toxins floating around in your body. You don't have to do anything to detoxify your kidneys or detoxify your liver. Your kidneys and liver are going to detoxify you. There are actually very complex physiological mechanisms that exist to get rid of any noxious substances that might enter your body, which, do from the food we eat, from the water we drink. So there's nothing that you need to do as a person to detoxify. That's not really a medical thing. And most certainly, you shouldn't be spending money to buy juices or cleanses or colonics or whatever. That's not going to make you any healthier. It might make you feel better. You may enjoy the taste if you like spinach or what have you. But it's not something that you need to do as a person. You should definitely eat more fruits and vegetables and cut back on your alcohol consumption, but you should be doing that year-round, not just in January.
We always like to have stuff that's fact-based. So when I said about scientific literature, there is nothing in the scientific literature, and this is not new, this goes back now years, right? There have been meta-studies here that shows that these things work at all. To your point, your organs, your kidney, your liver, etc., that's what they do. They're detoxifiers, right? So by adding anything, or you're not making them work any quicker, any more efficient.
No, and even something as simple as water. I mean, a lot of people think like, I'm going to drink more water.
Right.
It's going to help flush stuff out of my kidneys. All that's happening is you're just producing more dilute urine and more of it, so you'll go to the bathroom more often, but it doesn't make your kidney any better or any more efficient. The only medical situation in which drinking water makes a difference is if you have a kidney stone, but most people don't have a kidney stone at any one given point in time. So apart from that situation, or if it's, very hot outside and you've been exercising, but it's obviously not very hot outside these days. So there's no reason why somebody, listening to us right now has to go out and purposely drink water. You drink water if you're thirsty, but it's not going to flush out your kidneys. Your kidneys are going to keep working at the same rate regardless of what you put into your body.
So here's another question. I've been saw a couple of posts on social media basically trying to sell you on the idea, and there's nothing to buy here, so I want to point that out. They're not selling you a formula of any kind. But the idea is somehow someone has determined that drinking lemon in water in the morning, even before you have that cup of coffee, is actually good for you. But they said, no, not just, squeezing a lemon. Take the entire lemon, put it in, like a whole bunch of, 2 liters or a liter of water, blend the whole thing up, peel, seeds, the whole deal, and that's what you end up drinking in the morning. And that's supposed to, here we go again, cleanse or prepare your body to be cleansed before you have whatever you eat in the morning. What do you think of that?
No, I mean, you're basically describing lemonade without the sugar in it. So if you like lemonade and want to cut back on sugar, then good, go nuts.
Uh-huh.
But this sort of it borrows from this idea of like, there's a little bit of acid. Acid is going to break down fat. The reality is your body is going to neutralize that acid very, very quickly. So nothing that you eat is going to change the pH balance in your body to any measurable degree. If your body's acidity or base status starts changing, it's usually because you've gotten seriously sick and your kidneys have shut down. Nothing you eat or drink is going to change that.
Okay, so no lemon in the morning, no lemon juice. None of it. I read another thing actually just the other day on protein powders. Where are you on those?
So I remember the scene of The Simpsons where Homer was trying to gain weight to work from home, and he goes and he buys this protein bulking powder, and the guy at the health food store looks at him and says, "Good thing for you, this stuff doesn't work." Here's the thing. Nobody in Canada is protein deficient, right? I mean, unless you have this very, very restrictive diet. But I mean, from a practical point of view, anybody eating normal food is not going to become protein deficient. Young men in particular are not protein deficient. So the idea that you need to eat this to bulk up, no. I mean, here's the thing. Again, where this comes from, this is basically a spin-off of the Atkins diet. If we go back to its inception, like cut out carbs, eat more protein, which is fine as far as it goes of the sense of cut out carbs, but to purposely go and take a protein supplement is not going to change anything. The whole point was eat less sugar, get carbs out of our diets so that we can, sort of stem the tide of obesity that's, prevalent in North America.
Okay. So a question from a texter as we speak. If your body actually did that, as you're saying, clean itself, detoxify itself on its own, how come there's so many sick people?
Well, because first of all, people get sick from infections, right? Why do people have pneumonia? It's because bacteria entered your body. Why do people have heart disease? Well, it's because it's the slow buildup of plaque in your arteries over the course of 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Why do people get cancer? It's because eventually cells keep replicating, and at some point during your life, an error is introduced into the process where the cell has now mutated and it keeps spreading and spreading. That's what cancer is. It's a mutated cell. All diseases have an origin. The problem with the whole detoxify trend is that it tries to reduce everything down to a single cause. And that's implausible. Diseases are different. That's why the different treatments are different. And so we have a lot of different diseases in this world because the only safe bet in life is that you're not going to get out of it alive. But we should also point out life expectancy in this country keeps going up. So I think a lot of the anxiety that fuels people into looking to these trends is unfounded because, frankly, we are better off now than we have ever been. People think we're seeing more cancer in this country. We're seeing more cancer because the population is aging. But once you adjust for age and population size, cancer risk has actually gone down. You are at lower risk. You as an individual are at lower risk for cancer than your parents and grandparents were, largely because we smoke less. So we know what works. We know what we have to do. Diseases exist. But it's not because there are some unseen toxins in our body. And, we are actually healthier now than we have been in the past, despite, everything that we talk about in terms of obesity and all that.
To your point about longevity, and yes, we're living longer now, but then I have this argument with my wife all the time who will simply say, yeah, sure, we're living longer, but we're living sicker. In other words, if you can live to 90 or 95, or if you're lucky enough to live to 100, but people are sicker longer, that we're just keeping them alive.
Well, no, and I don't agree with that. So go and look at pictures of people from a century ago. People in their 20s, they looked old. We are staying younger for longer. I mean, you look at somebody in their 50s now, they do not look like a 50-year-old from, a generation back. Mm-hmm. So yes, we're living longer, but we're also extending. It used to be that somebody died in their 50s and you said, oh, he was an old man. He died at the end of his life. Now somebody dies in their 70s and you're like, oof, they died young. You go speak to most people in their 70s and 80s. They are still functionally independent, going about their business. That was not true a generation ago. So, yes, we've extended the human lifespan, and yes, we have more chronic diseases because you're not dying from your first heart attack anymore. But people are still functionally independent well into their 70s, 80s. And, in fact, there are people who are now starting to push 100. It may be that in 20 years, the idea of living to 100 and being, functionally independent, that may not be science fiction. That may end up being a reality.
Last thing I want to ask you, and I'm curious, we started watching this. Have you seen this documentary, Don't Die, The Man Who Wants to Live Forever, Brian Johnson?
No, but it sounds interesting.
So you need to watch it. It really is quite remarkable. But he has decided that, and I think he's taking 52 pills a day, and all his markers, and he's chronicling all this, right, are designed so that every level he needs to be at, he has reached, right? And his physical age and his actual, health age, if you will, he's 7 years younger, I think, than he actually is. And he's only in his 50s now, and he plans to do this forever. So, but maybe after you see, we can talk about that.
I'm curious. The problem with this is I almost feel like you should live to 100 and then sell your book, right, about how to live forever. You should, the proof should be in the pudding. If he ends up dying in his mid-60s, I'm not sure it was that great a plan.
Excellent point. Dr. Chris Labos. Chris, thank you so much. We'll talk again soon. It's called Don't Die, The Man Who Wants to Live Forever. It's on Netflix. Let me know after you've seen it, okay?
All right, cool.
We'll talk soon.
Cool.
Informative. Interactive. And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now.
So far, we know only one confirmed candidate for the Liberal leadership federally in this country. And it turns out he is a local man, Frank Baylis, who had served, by the way, as an MP, a Liberal MP from 2015 to 2019, has decided he's the man. So we thought we'd try to find a little bit more about him. Frank Baylis is on the line. Mr. Baylis, thanks so much for your time.
Hello, Aaron. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and Happy New Year to you. Let me begin by asking, because I know from what I've read in the past little while, you didn't decide this on the spur of the moment. You've been thinking about this for a while, right?
Yeah, actually, since the day I walked out, people have been asking me to come back into politics. I'm not a career politician, so I was never thinking about that. But I've got so much encouragement, and yes, then I started thinking and taking those requests very seriously.
Which leads me to ask the first question, which is, you served as an MP from 2015 to 2019, yet you chose not to run again. Why not?
There's many reasons that fold into that, but a fundamental reason is I don't think we should have professional politicians. I really think we need politicians that come, do good work, and then leave. And I consider it a great honor to have served the people of Pierrefonds-Dollard. I'm very proud of that. But I also think that it's good to make space for other people and also bring fresh ideas.
Okay, so let me deal with some of the ideas that you're bringing to the table now. First of all, with respect to Donald Trump, that's a topic that everybody who's running is eventually going to have to deal with here. He amped up the rhetoric earlier this week, talking about annexing Canada. How do you handle Donald Trump if you're leader of the Liberal Party and if you were to become prime minister?
So, Aaron, I've done business with Americans for the last 35 years. I can't even count how many contracts I've negotiated with American governments, hospitals, purchasing groups. You name it, I've negotiated with them. By and large, I've enjoyed it. There are some negotiators that use very aggressive tactics, shock tactics, try and knock you off your game. Donald Trump, let's give him credit. He's good at that, and he's doing that. It'll have absolutely no impact on me if I come to negotiate with him. And it'll be water off a duck's back. I've dealt with these type of approaches before. It's a negotiating approach. He wants to be talking about it. He wants us worried. He wants us ready to cut any deal to avoid some catastrophe. I don't say I take these lightly, Aaron. I'm not saying I'm taking any threats he makes lightly. We should prepare for a trade war. But a trade war, yes, it hurts Canada, but it hurts the United States just as much. So we need to keep that in mind.
Prepare for a trade war. So, I mean, I heard some people talking about the idea that if there was to be, in fact, a 25% tariff, as Trump has talked about, threatened, if you will, that could cost Canada 2% of our GDP and obviously thousands upon thousands of jobs. You think it's simply a matter of recognizing he's a businessman, you're a businessman, and you're best positioned to be able to deal with him?
Look, let's talk about that, how it hurts us. But imagine if you're the American and you live on the Eastern Seaboard and suddenly your electric bill just went up 25% overnight. Bang. Or you're living off, you're heating your house off Alberta oil or gas, and suddenly your cost of heating just went up 25%. Or you're having your car input parts going up 25%. It's a threat. It's not good for Canada, and it's not good for the United States. We just need to be able to weather it. I doubt it will come to that, but I don't blow it off. But I think most importantly for your listeners to know that these are negotiating tactics. I've dealt with this in the past. I have no problem dealing with it in the future.
Okay, let me move on and talk about the race itself. We found out today Dominic LeBlanc, who many people thought had a good chance, has decided not to run. I had Marc Miller on my show yesterday. He's made the decision not to run as well. You're the only official candidate in this race. And of course, maybe the advantage you have here to a degree is that you're not part of this current Liberal government. So how are you different from those who might consider running?
What I could say is how I'm different in a fundamental sense. Well, look, my father and my mother are both immigrants. My father immigrated from England. My mother's from Barbados. I was born here. I grew up here. And I'm a professional engineer by training, an electrical engineer, educated in the University of Waterloo, and I'm an entrepreneur. That's my career. I'm not a career politician. I'm probably as different from Pierre Poilievre as you can get, and I think that Canadians are looking for a real contrast. So I think I could bring that. I can bring real-world experience to deal with the challenges that Canadians are facing, and I think all my experience and, quite frankly, my successes in life speak to that. The difference between me and, say, someone like Pierre Poilievre is excellent at giving slogans and upsetting people and getting them worked up, that's where it starts for him, but it's also where it stops. He doesn't have real solutions. He never worked a day in his life outside of being in the federal government. And he's been, I think, 21 years he's been elected and going strong.
So you think by virtue of the fact that, and people have talked about this as well, the fact that you have a background in business is an advantage for you?
I think that the fact that I've been extremely successful in business is an advantage for me. I've started from humble beginnings. I'm a believer in Canadian know-how, Canadian technology, Canadian businesses. We have an affordability crisis in Canada. And the way we're going to get out of this is a two-pronged approach. We have to invest in ourselves. We have to believe in Canadian know-how, Canadian universities, Canadian technology, and Canadian businesses. And we have to work to make them grow. At the same time we do that, Aaron, if we get that going well and we get our fiscal house in order, guess what? The exchange rate gets better. So people complain, say, about groceries, but a grocer, so what happens for the politicians? What they do is they ask all the grocers to come up to Ottawa and they yell at them, tell them off and all that. But the reality is the grocery store has to buy a banana in U.S. dollars, ship it to Canada, and then convert to Canadian dollars. We're now below 16, we're at 69 cents. Every time that dollar drops, the price of a banana goes up. And you can yell at the grocer, but that's not going to solve the problem. What solves the problem is getting our dollar back up, getting our fiscal house in order, and getting Canadians great jobs. And that's what I do. That's what I'm great at. Okay.
One of the things that hangs over the Liberals, and one that Pierre Poilievre wastes no time in talking about regularly, is the carbon tax. What do we do on the carbon tax? Are you prepared to eliminate that, to break from the party on that? What's your position there?
I'm going to have an honest conversation with Canadians, okay? There was a time you could pollute the earth, and we said you're not allowed to do that, so we have to pay for garbage pickup, we have to pay for garbage dumps, we have to pay for recycling. There was a time we polluted the water. We just dumped our sewage into the water. We say, no, you can't do that anymore. So we have sewage treatment plants. There's a time now where we allow people to pollute the air, and that's not going to happen. We're going to fix that. And is there going to be a cost? Yes. Does it have to be the carbon tax? I don't know that yet. I have to learn and study more. But I don't want people to believe what Pierre Poilievre is saying is that the carbon tax is going to fix the affordability issue. It's not. And I don't think it's fair to Canadians to say there's going to be no cost to giving you clean air. We can have clean air, but we have to invest in that.
It would seem to me as well for Canadians, if you were to become the leader, you're dealing with a party now that's got a $62 billion deficit. I think that may be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in Canadian history. You become the leader of the Liberal Party. What do you do to say to Canadians, you know what, we've made mistakes. The deficit should not be this high. Here's what I'm going to do to change it.
Well, look, I'm not going to litigate the past. I'm not a professional. I'll leave that to other people. What I'm going to be doing is looking forward for Canadians. I'm a forward-looking guy, and I'm very optimistic about our country, Aaron. We live in a great country. It's a wonderful country. We have wonderful opportunities. Do we have challenges? Absolutely. But I'm willing to look forward to them and step forward into them. So I'll leave, reviewing that to history professors, but I'm focused on going forward.
Okay, you just said challenges. So what challenges specifically are you referring to? What challenges do we have here?
Well, we do need to get our fiscal house in order. We need to help affordability, and that affordability goes for groceries, for housing, cost of living, you name it. We need to get our productivity up. These are all things that I've done in the past. This is my skill set, if I could say that, and I've done it in the real world. So that's what I want to bring to the government.
Okay, let me ask you another thing. The reality is, let's say you go ahead and win the leadership of the Federal Liberal Party. You go back to Ottawa, March 24th, 2 days later, there's a non-confidence vote, your government falls. Now, the Liberal Party, and let's just pick around numbers, 20 points, 25 points behind the Conservatives. The chance of winning a federal election, no matter who that leader is, even if it's you, is very, very slim. Are you prepared to then stay in the House of Commons for 4 more years waiting for the next election? Is that part of your plan?
First of all, I fully believe that Pierre Poilievre has had a free ride. And I'm going to be calling him out on a number of his contradictory statements, a number of things that he says that makes no sense. And I'm going to be giving Canadians from coast to coast to coast a real alternative that they haven't seen for a while. And I think I can win that. Now, maybe I'm overly optimistic, but you know what? When it's darkest before the dawn, and I'm not afraid of challenges. I've run into challenges my whole life, and we step up to them. And I do honestly believe that he has had a free ride. And I don't think he's going to offer real solutions to Canadians. And I am. And I know he's going to want to talk about the past and the past and the past because he wins that argument. He thinks or not. I'm not even going to bother with that. I'm going to talk about our future. And we have a great future in front of us as Canadians.
You think the Liberals, with you at the head of this party, can actually win the next federal election?
Yeah, what's going to happen is this. Okay, whenever someone's selling you something that they know is not the best for you, what do they try and do? Act now, act fast, get this deal. They push you. They want an immediacy of your decision because they know if you take your time, you may not buy that. So what is he trying to do? Look at Pierre Poilievre, how he's screaming for an election. The last thing he wants to do is face anyone like me. And what he's going to try and do, and you just said it, give me not even a day if I'm lucky enough to win. Why? Because he knows that people calm down, take their time. So when someone's selling you something, forget whatever it is. If they say, please, 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 take your time, shop around, that's because they really believe in their product. The person says, act now, buy now, you got to do right now, because they don't want you to think. Because if they think if you take your time, you'll make a different decision, a better decision. So I'm going to be saying to them, please take your time. Look at us. Look at what we're offering. Look at what his experience is in life. Look at what mine is. What do we need? I think I win that argument. I don't want to sound arrogant, but I think I win it rather easily.
All right. That's where we have to leave it, I'm afraid. Mr. Baylis, first of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today, and I wish you the best of luck. Hope we can speak again.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Frank Baylis, the first declared candidate for leadership of the Federal Liberal Party.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.